Well, it's always a privilege to follow Craig, and in fact, some of the things I'm going to say, one could almost say that they draw both from some of the things he has said and, of course, some of the things he has done, some of the struggles he has fought in the past. But first, what I'd like to just say is, I mean, we hear all the time about whether or not this is a political trial, whether, in fact, Julian Assange, the extradition that is being requested of Julian Assange is because he's committed some kind of criminal offences, or whether it's a political case. It is, of course, a political case. Let us have absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. Julian Assange is a journalist. What he has done by providing us with information about the secrets of those in power is what journalists should do. That is perhaps not what journalists increasingly are doing, but it is what Julian Assange, as a journalist, is doing and has done. And the reason he is being tried, or the United States is seeking his extradition, and that the British government is considering extraditing him to the United States, and we have all these hearings going on in Woolwich, is, of course, because of the person, the government, that is embarrassed and wants to keep all this secret. It is the United States government. It is clearly because he has embarrassed the United States government by exposing its secrets, exposing its war crimes, that he finds himself in the situation in which he is. And that makes this clearly a political, not a criminal case. That's the first thing to say. Now, I think there is something that follows from that, and that is, given that this is a political case, consider the way he has been treated. We've had a situation where Julian Assange is at the moment being heard. The case against him is taking place in Woolwich Crown Court. He's been kept in a glass cage. He's having difficulties communicating with his lawyers. He's been strip searched. His documents have been taken from him. This comes after years of confinement in the embassy, which caused him problems to his health. He's then been kept in a maximum security prison in Belmarsh. He's had restrictions on his movement, restrictions on his medical treatment. He's been kept in close confinement. He's been denied access many times to his lawyers. He's been placed under surveillance. His communications with his lawyers have been monitored in gross violation of the whole basic principle of legal professional privilege that is supposed to exist between an individual and his or her lawyers. As a fundamental human right that has been understood and accepted since due process, the whole concept of due process, has come to be known. Well, how can that be explained other than by the fact that this is clearly a political case? And moreover, we have had no less a person than the UN, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, telling us that all of this treatment of Julian Assange has, in effect, amounted to his mistreatment. Cruel and unusual punishments, borderline torture, perhaps even torture. Torture, conditions of confinement, which have had a very serious effect on his health. And let us always remember that there is another person involved in this case who is going through much of the same mistreatment, and I'm of course referring to Chelsea Manning. It always concerns me that so little has been said about Chelsea Manning, but she at the moment finds herself also in a state of indefinite detention because she is not prepared to give evidence against WikiLeaks. We don't know the whole story of this case, but clearly it's clear to me that the case against Chelsea Manning, such as it is, the reason she's in confinement is related to the case we have against Julian Assange. Chelsea Manning is being coerced to try to get her to give evidence. That is an outrageous thing. That is absolutely something that happens in the most brutal authoritarian societies. Now, we have heard so much over the course of Julian Assange's case about alleged abuse. I want to make it very clear, alleged abuse of women. Here is a woman, Chelsea Manning, being kept in indefinite detention, a woman who is being abused. Where are the protests? Where are the stern editorials in the newspapers? Where are the questions in Parliament, in chambers, throughout the legal world, from the NGOs, about this person who finds herself in this situation? Now, I have to say, I am somebody who, in the first decade of my life, lived in a country, that's Greece, in the 60s, where due process collapsed, where there was a dictatorship, where torture became pervasive, where there was no freedom of speech. And I have to say, it was a deeply, deeply oppressive and frightening situation. And it was extraordinary to see, and even as a child I could sense it, how this affected the whole way in which society was run. And it seems to me that what we're seeing in Julian Assange's case, in Chelsea Manning's case, is that these practices, which, to be very clear, have been exported and used around the world by the United States government, by the British government, by our governments, they're being imported back to our home countries. So we see people, we see Julian Assange going through what Craig Murray has just described as a show trial. We see him being mistreated in full view, in full public view, in Belmarsh, at the Ecuadorian embassy. We see Chelsea Manning being kept, as I said, in indefinite detention and fined repeatedly to coerce her to give evidence. And it's not going to stop there. The reason this is happening is because when people like Craig Murray denounced the torture that was going on around the world against the enemies of our countries, not enough people made a stand. And we see it now happening in plain sight in our own countries, under our own jurisdictions, with the collusion, it seems, of our own courts and of our own legal systems. And this is an extraordinarily troubling thing, worse than troubling, for me, who saw it happen as a child in Greece, my home country. It is an astonishing thing that it could have come and spread here. And I ask this question: what sort of societies have we become where these sort of things can happen? And what sort of societies will we become if we allow these things to continue? Normalization of mistreatment and abuse, collapse of due process. It won't just be a few journalists, a few brave journalists, who then have to be afraid. It will spread inexorably to all of us. This is a cause that we have to win. Chelsea Manning is both an example to us, as well as an example of what may happen to us. She, by the stand she is taking, has shown extraordinary courage. We can do no less. I thank you for coming here.